Welcome to the podcast for real-life heroines. Let's embark on a journey that unveils the extraordinary stories of everyday women who redefine what it means to be a heroine or hero. Life is a tapestry of inspiration and magic, and today's episode is no exception. Here's your host, Susanna Liller.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, joining me. Welcome to my podcast for real life heroines. And the heroines who are my guests on this show are not necessarily book heroines or film heroines. They are people that you might meet every day. They are women that you see, your daughter, your mother, your best friend, who have done something with their lives in response to a call from within that tells them to make a change. And we do this many times in our lives. And so it requires taking a risk, leaving a comfort zone. And that's how I define heroine. So today, boy, oh boy, I have such a real life heroine with me today, someone who is fully acquainted, I would say, with her heroine self, Dawna Markova. Welcome, Dawna.
My pleasure. Aloha.
Aloha. So aloha, you come to us today. We're talking to Dawna, who is in Maui, and I'm in Maine, but look at us. It's like we're next door.
Unlived parentheses of each other.
Right. How lovely. So I'm going to say a little bit about you, and then there's a story that I want to tell about us.
Wonderful.
Okay, and then we're going to hear about you and what you've been up to. But here we go. So Dawna Markova followed her precious grandmother's footsteps to become a midwife. But rather than babies, she helps birth possibilities within and between people. She has lived many incarnations in the past 7 decades. Author, teacher, psychotherapist, researcher, executive advisor, and organizational. People who know me are going to note that there's a big common thing here as a fairy godmother, organizational fairy godmother. And so here the two of us, fairy godmothers. One of the creators of the best-selling Random Acts of Kindness series, Dawna is the author of many other inspirational books. These are just some. I Will Not Die, an Unlived Life, Reclaiming Purpose and Passion. And Dawna, I'm going to ask you at the end if you would read that amazing poem, which so many people took that poem so to heart, putting it on their refrigerator, sharing it with each other. So I would love you to read it. Also, Connecting in a Disconnected World, Collaborative Intelligence, Thinking with People Who Think Differently, A Spot of Grace, Remarkable Stories of How You Do Make a Difference. And I think people that just hearing those titles, you get a good sense of Dawna and what she's about. And she, again, midwives people's gifts, talents, and dreams. And one thing that I really like about her writing and what she talks to us about questing for purpose and passion. And to me, when people ask me, what's the difference between a hero's quest and a heroine's quest? When Dawna talks about questing, she talks about revealing your wisdom, which is just below the surface, and asking these amazing questions, which I'm going to share a little bit about that later. But I think heroines, and Dawna, see what you think, are more about questing internally, heroes questing externally. Yeah. So, okay, our story. How did we connect? And people might be surprised because it was 2008 and I was it was glorious that you even remembered me, but you remembered me, Dawna, because we had an unusual interaction. So I was being certified for coaching at the Hudson Institute. Actually, I had already been certified. This was a conference afterwards that we went, and Dawna was the keynote speaker. And I sat there and I can remember it very clearly. She gave such a talk. I was so inspired. I was just telling her, it was like she wound me right up. And so we got to, I got her book and I went to, no, I'm sorry. It wasn't around the book. Pam McLean, the director of the school, the Hudson Institute for Coaching, invited me to sit at the luncheon table, and you were there too. And I was really overwhelmed. I sat down and you said, boy, those are really pretty earrings. And I didn't even think. I took them out of my ears and gave them to you. So I'm sure that helped you remember me. And tell us where those earrings are today.
Those earrings today are in the possession of my daughter-in-law.
Yeah.
She married my son, who you will hear more about, and but she was much more than that to me.
Yeah.
And her mother is still alive, so I couldn't call her my daughter. I always wanted a daughter. If I could mold and shape a daughter, it would be just like Angie. So the earrings went to Angie, so she would believe in the possible
Yeah.
and believe in magic
Right.
of a kind we can create, that
Right.
kind of magic.
Oh, would you please tell Angie, because I think she's with you now with her dog, that I couldn't be happier.
I will tell her that.
Yes, thank
I
you.
will tell her.
So that's how we met. And so then when I was looking for who would also inspire the people who listen to this podcast, of course it would be you. And so when we started writing, you said, well, I'm working on another manuscript. And I explained to you how this podcast is about asking women to tell one of their heroines' journey stories. And that it's about you're in ordinary life and then you get a call and you take off into the unknown and there's your journey and you learn and grow as a result. And you were able to come up with, yeah, I've got one, and it's this book that I'm writing. So tell us about Wounded No More, A Woman's Journey to Reclaim Possibility. Please.
Well, first of all, I want to comment to you that we are fairy god sisters, because if you look at my background in my room that I'm in, and we look at your background in your room, and we look at your hair and my hair and your glasses and my glasses.
Look at that.
There are many ways.
What about our magic wands?
And our magic wands. Yes, we both have magic wands.
There you go.
This was from Leonard Bernstein, actually. He used to conduct with this. Anyway, so you asked me a question and about the current manuscript that I'm on, which is why I actually am here, because otherwise I would probably be in silence or solitude. The current manuscript, so I've written 18 books. This is the 19th. And it was meant to be a movie script. A filmmaker who I helped, the filmmaker and his wife, I was their fairy godmother and I helped them get pregnant. That's the background. And he said, how do you meditate? And I said, well, I have 3 questions that I sit with every morning. What's unfinished for me to give? What's unfinished for me to learn? And what's unfinished for me to experience? And since I'm 82, those questions become much more and more and more important to me. And he said, well, what in the world is unfinished for you to give? You've written 18 books and you've taught all around the world and la, 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 you wrote a famous poem. And I said, well, there's a story I haven't told. And he said, well, tell me the story. So I began to tell him the story about when it was the lowest point in my life. And I ended up driving around the world with my son, who was then 4. In 1970 was when this all happened. My whole life exploded. My husband of the time, my husband, beat me up, beat up my son. And I ended up, which is the story of that I needed to tell, not just healing from that, but realizing that the greatest wound of all was my loss of belief in what could be possible.
Mm.
And so I wrote the screenplay, and then the actors' strike started and la, la, la. And so I said, okay, well, I'll make it into a book. So I talked to 5 women that are publishers and have published books of mine. And they all said, oh, memoirs. Everybody in your generation is writing a memoir. Nobody's reading a memoir. So we're not interested in memoirs. But one of the women said, expand it into your story of why you went on this trip, what went on, la, la, la. And I said, well, I'll consider that. And I started doing research. And one of the things she said is, go back to the time that you were beaten up. And I said, no, 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 I'm not a victim of domestic violence. She said, well, you were hospitalized. I said, I know, but A, I'm not a victim. I've had cancer 8 times. I am not a victim. B, I am not, every book that I have read or story that I have heard about women that have been abused in their marriage, the story ends when they're out of the marriage. But what happens after that? How do they reclaim the sense that the world is full of possibilities and that we come here born to seed those possibilities, to water those possibilities, to grow those possibilities? And that's so deep in us that if that isn't healed and reclaimed, we end up soulless in a certain way. And the one publisher I'm thinking said, write that.
Mm.
So I have stacks and stacks thinking, well, maybe I was wrong. Maybe someone wrote this. I mean, not about driving in the world, but maybe someone wrote about women who are wounded, reclaiming their sense of possibility. I haven't found one yet.
Wow.
So I said, okay, I'll do it. And I figured 18 books is enough for any one person to write. So I have been, I still have a few clients, but basically I immersed myself in pottery because I became obsessed with clay for who knows what reason. And we live in this beautiful place and it's silent. And I've spent my whole, at least 80 years of my life talking to people in groups. And silence was what I needed to balance my life, so I would die feeling balanced. So I didn't want to, so I stopped writing. I thought that was it. And this would not leave me alone. And once I started researching it had a social significance, if you will, then I said, okay, one more, but just one more. And now it is almost finished. And what it will be, I don't know. Will it be a screenplay? Will it be a book? Will it be an audiobook? Will it be something I put in my drawer for my son to decide what to do with? I have no idea. But it's almost done. I mean, we're a week away from completion.
Brava. Wonderful.
And you called or you emailed, and it was perfect. It was like divine intervention with your merry magic wand going, nope, don't stop, keep going.
Wonderful. So it begs the question, but I don't want to spoil the ending or the surprise because, obviously you were able to reclaim possibility. And I'm wondering how, can you share a little bit about how that happened after that horrible thing happened to you? And then I think you went 50,000 miles with your, was it the driving that helped you?
Exactly, exactly. So let's see. So the synopsis is that, because a lot of people have said, well, why did you drive
Right.
2 years with a
Yeah.
4-year-old? I said, well, I drove because growing up at the time that I did, my mother was very meek. My father was a lion and my mother was a mouse. And
Mhm.
I grew up with a very weak mother. By weak, sorry, mom, a mother who used to sleep in a Playtex living girdle.
Oh, okay.
So that says more than anything else. She was buried in a Playtex living girdle.
Oh,
So anyway, but she learned to drive when I was 15, and it was really a big deal. And she was liberated for the first time in her life. She didn't have to ask my father to be able to go someplace or do something. And I watched that liberation in my mother, never from her girdle, but nonetheless, she was liberated. She started swimming, she started playing cards. She said, and I went, I want to do that. So that was the first thing. And I immediately learned to drive at 16. And then by the time I was, how old was I? 17. I saw race cars, sports cars at Lime Rock, Connecticut, not so far from you. And
mm,
I thought, I want to drive those. But women weren't allowed to drive sports cars. So I dressed up. I bought one of those suits, those white suits, and put my hair way back and put on a helmet and got glasses and went to Lime Rock Racetrack.
wow.
And I think it was 2 weeks before, I had made money in my first job, and I bought myself a Jaguar XK 150 Roadster that was for sale. I found it in the New York Times. I thought my father would have a total shit fit. And long story short is that when I got to the racetrack, I met this other person who was a woman whose name was Denise McCluggage. And she's still alive and she's a sports writer, but she also was disguised. And we both talked like this, and we went and began racing. And she would race, I forget what her car was, and I think she had a Ferrari, and I raced my Porsche. And so driving was, to me, an instrument of liberation.
Definitely.
And so when I came out of the hospital and I sold everything, et cetera, and I was still covered in bruises. My son was covered in bruises. And I had started a school in Florida that was called the University School, and it was a lab school at Nova University. And it was for kids that had learning differences, because that's what my doctoral dissertation was about, understanding intellectual diversity. And so I started the school, and it was very successful. And then the school got taken over by this very wealthy woman who didn't like kids sitting outside debating about suicide and reading John Steinbeck. So she uh, expelled most of the kids and wanted to turn it into a posh private school. And so at the time, she and I was there as an advocate for the kids. So we had some differences, shall we say. And when she kicked all the kids out, and then she fired me, I sat down, and the marriage at that time was exploding.
Yes.
And my husband was into wife swapping, which I was not into husband swapping. And he was also in our marital bed with my best friend, la la la. And so it was a really awful time of my
It
life.
sounds very awful.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it was a time of wounding. And so I sued this woman that took over the school, and I won the law school,
Oh,
and I wrote an article for the Miami Herald, and it was the first thing I had ever written. And so I won $20,000.
wow.
And a magazine had just started called New Woman Magazine. And I thought, perfect, that magazine is for me. And I went to the editor, Margaret Herald. I still remember it and remember her name. And I said, I want to write a column for your magazine. And I still had bruises all over my face. I don't know why she agreed. I said, it's going to be called Alternate Lifestyle for a Wounded Housewife.
Mm.
She said, are you all right? You know, I can imagine. And I said, I'm fine. I'm fine. And she said, I love it. I said, it's about myself and my son, who's 4, driving around the world. I have no idea where that came from. No idea. And so she said, well, if we change the title, we'll make it Alternate Lifestyle for a Frustrated Housewife. This was in the early 70s.
Yeah.
And she said, then I'll buy it and we'll pay for your travels.
Oh,
So I
wow.
took the $20,000. I ordered a Mercedes diesel, which is another story. But anyway, and I began with David, who was 4 at the time. And we went for 2 years. And we drove 50,000 miles through Europe, Eastern Europe, Greece, Jerusalem, Africa, down the coast of Africa, and then through the Orient. We followed Nixon into China, came out, ended up, the end of the trip was Japan, because David said, he was 6, Mommy, I want a home outside my body. And so we flew back to San Diego. I sold the car, bought a yellow Volkswagen, drove cross country, and there you have it. Ended up at Dartmouth because my sister had a ski house in Killington. And that's where the story begins.
And
But that's
all that time you're writing and sending the column back.
once a month.
Wow.
Once a month.
And it was successful.
I guess so. It sold.
So then translating that into, okay, something awful has happened to me. What do I do with it? Your response was, I create something. I keep moving. I see the possible. I mean, you had possibilities every day because you were visiting places and seeing sights you had never seen.
Right. Plus, I came from a home where, and a time where I was very protected. Not protected from a man who almost killed me, but very protected in
Sheltered.
certain ways,
Yeah.
you know? And his psychiatrist kept saying, what is this with PhDs and all this stuff? Drop out of school and be a normal housewife. His problems are your fault because he can't compete with you. I said, why would he want to compete with me? So I had all of that, which was like being toothpaste inside of a tube. And then this big explosion, the cap came off.
Yes.
And I knew if I stayed in the United States, no one in my family had ever been divorced.
Mm.
So I knew 2 things would happen. My father, who was very big and very strong, would have found him if he knew and beat him up, probably killed him. And my mother and sister had this litany of no one in our family has ever gotten a divorce. So I had to get away. There wasn't, as far as I saw it at the time, for David and for me, there wasn't. Plus, Steve was an unknown. I didn't know when he would, be released from the mental hospital. I had no idea. So that was it. I had no idea where I was going, except I had a ticket to London. That was it.
Wow.
And when the agent said at the airport, this is the last part, where are you going? And I said, away from here.
Mm.
That was our mantra, away from here. And as long as we only stayed 3 weeks in a place, because then I had to write a new column from a new place. That's how long we stayed. So we could never stay any place more than 3 weeks.
What an adventure.
Indeed.
And so good that you're writing about it.
Yeah.
So good that you're writing about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering back to going to the racetrack in Connecticut. So did
Yeah.
you grow up in Connecticut?
I grew up in Westchester County.
Okay.
So I grew up in New Rochelle, but that was near enough to Connecticut, Greenwich. All of that was like our neighborhood. So
I'm asking because another thing we haven't, I grew up in Trumbull and I knew Connecticut and I
yeah,
knew that that was Paul Newman's racetrack.
right,
Yeah.
right.
What a story. Yeah. So what kind of car do you have now, Dawna?
I have a Tesla,
Ah,
and when I turned 70, because our house is solar, we live someplace where that's a total possibility. Although it's a political challenge because Elon Musk is anyway, so that's another story. But so that's what I have now. But when I turned 70, one of the hardest things for me was I was driving and I went around a corner and I almost hit another car because my reaction time was not quick.
yeah.
And I knew enough about that, having raced sports cars, to know this is not safe. And I also knew that with my mother and my father, we had to argue, steal the keys. I said, I'm not going to do that.
Mm.
So I threw the keys to Andy and I said, it's yours.
Mm.
And so I don't drive anymore,
Yeah.
which is wonderful, because where would you rather be exiled than Maui?
Right. Oh my God. I've been, and so I know it's
Right.
amazing. Yeah. So I'm thinking maybe this is the time to ask you, but wait, before we go there, I just want to point out to people, this book,
Yeah.
Wide Open, on living with passion and purpose, is full of questions to ask yourself to help you have a internal conversation with yourself and what needs to come up. And so those 3 questions that you ask yourself every morning are like these, but it's interesting because I didn't know about your story about the well, I did know that you were beat up by your husband horribly, but I just decided I was going to pick one question just to share what this is like. And I picked this one. What wound in your life has been a passageway to your purpose?
Mm.
How could its healing provide a connection to the healing of the world? And it seems like that's so relevant to what you were your wound opened you up to this adventure, this opportunity, which you shared with the world, and now you're continuing to share.
Right. Right. See,
So,
I have this theory about questions. I was raised, most of us today were raised, and unfortunately are still being raised, where there is this polarity between domination and collaboration. And to take it out of a gender framework, and it goes back thousands of years, actually. But they are completely, I was trained as a neuroscientist, and they are completely different mental sets. So the mental set of domination is this one knows more than this one.
right.
This one is wealthier than this one.
Mm-hmm.
And women are not trained to dominate. So if you don't dominate, you are submissive.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you're a woman or not a woman, that's pretty obvious. And if you're a man who's not naturally dominating, you will be shamed into what's the matter with you? Are you a wuss? My husband has the heart of a woman, as we were raised. And he was shamed into it and taught to wrestle and, all this stuff. You must dominate. But if, on the other hand, you ask the very same questions, but in a different way, your brain opens up into a state called curiosity and then wonder. And that enables you to connect to other people. And that creates partnerships. And we are living in a time right now where there is this struggle between domination and partnership. And how do we create the conditions where a partnership mentality can emerge?
Yeah, I'm sure, you have been studying this, you've been writing about it. I'm sure this time in our lives, it has reached the height of its worstness.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
And
So
its largest possibilities. Both are true. Both are true. What will we use AI for? Will we use it to dominate? We use it to partner.
right. Why don't you read us your poem, if you would, please?
It would be my delight. So this poem was written the night my father died. And you know now the relationship I had with my father. He would beat me, and then right after he would hug me and say, now you're going to be a good girl, right? And he would beat me with the buckle of his belt, enraged, but then he would embrace me. And I grew up with that from the time I was very young. So when he died, to say I had a mixture of feelings is to put it mildly.
Understatement.
Yes. And he died, he had Alzheimer's 5 years before he died. So when he died, he was a roaring lion, Leo, CEO type, dominating male. And he 6'3", 6'4". He died this shrinking little, he didn't know where he was. He couldn't take care of himself. And that left me with great, to say confusion is not even big enough. Anyway, he lived in Florida, of course, and I went down to see him because my mother said, it's near the end, you better come. And I went there, and he was sitting in this little rocking chair, but not rocking, all curled up. And I tried to get through, and I said, Daddy, here's a nickel. Daddy, wake up. I love you. Daddy, I love you. Nothing got through. And then when he could never say, I love you, Dawna, but what he would do was give me a nickel or a dollar or a $5 bill. And he'd put it in my hand, and that was his way of saying, I love you. So
you told the story at Hudson, I'm remembering. Okay.
So I pulled out of my purse a $5 bill, and I pried his hand open, and I put a $5 bill in his hand, closed his hand, and he looked at me like this, and he said, I love you too, sweetheart.
Oh, gee.
And so then he died the next day. And so this is the poem that I wrote that has found its way around the world. It's now 23 languages. But it was written in my tears. I will not die an unlived life. I will not live in fear of falling or catching fire. I choose to inhabit my days, to allow my living to open me, to make me less afraid, more accessible, to loosen my heart until it becomes a wing, a torch, a promise. I choose to risk my significance, to live so that which came to me as seed goes on to the next as blossom. And that which came to me as blossom goes on as fruit.
What a poem. What a poem. We all need to take that in here.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, anybody can see why I was so inspired hearing you talk that day. Yeah. So Dawna, thank you for that. Thank you for writing it. I wonder, there's so much that you've shared with us today and a lot for people to take in, and they will, and this will be published and they'll be able to listen. But if they could only remember one thing after hearing about your full and rich life and doing what you did, what would you want to tell them? What do you want them to remember? And mostly, Dawna, you're talking to women right now.
I understand that. People have said, why aren't you writing this new book to women and men? And I just smile. I don't even try to answer. What would I want them to know? Inside of them, as long as they are alive, there are seeds of the possible.
Mm.
And those seeds are wanting to be watered with their tears, not their cold tears, but their warm tears. Those tears are meant to water those seeds that are possibilities that they go, oh, if only I could.
Mm.
And those possibilities need one thing. They need to be fed with wonder. So that instead of if only I could becomes if only I could, I wonder. And just the wonder enables that little seed to break through the shell to crack. And the wonder alone will cause the seed to sprout and reach. And it's all around us. That law of possibility is all around us.
Mm.
And it's also within us.
Yeah. And saying those words cracks the door open for that to come in.
Right.
Yeah.
And a divorce can crack the shell.
Mm.
A death can crack the shell. I mean, life brings all that by itself. We don't have to help things crack open. An election can crack that open. There's all kinds of things. Rape can crack it open, and all kinds of things. But the choices we make when those things happen,
Right. That's the difference.
whether we reach or whether we
Close up.
is
Yeah.
up to us.
All right. What a message. Yes. Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you. I'm telling you, this is why I gave you those earrings so long ago. I knew it would reach through time and I'd get to be able to talk to you and ask you these questions and have you share your story. I'm going to look for that book or that movie or whatever it comes out to be.
I will let you know what it becomes,
Right.
and you can let everybody else know what it has.
I will. And we might talk again.
There is a beautiful expression in Hawaiian, and the expression is ahui ho.
Mm-hmm.
And ahui ho means until our spirits touch. And why I love that is that it means just our spirits have to touch, the way sunlight touches a plant. Just our spirits have to touch. So ahui ho.
Ahui ho to you. And
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you to people who have listened and tuned in today to hear this remarkable woman share her story with us and give us her time. And I hope that it has inspired you as much as it has inspired me. And
to experience this remarkable midwife,
yeah,
who puts her hands out and makes stories and helps my stories come forth.
Right. So reaching out, connecting. Yes, I was a little bit afraid to connect with you, Dawna, thinking, oh, she's like big time, and who am I? And that's what happens to us. We go into the who am I? But I did it, and I'm so grateful that I did, and to you. So bless you all on your journey, and we will talk to another heroine next month.
Yeah. Hui ho, dear.
Hui ho, I'm.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the podcast for real life heroines. Your time and presence mean the world to us. If you're hungry for more inspiration and ready to craft your own heroine story, connect with Susanna outside of the show. Visit susannalillard.com to discover her courses and programs designed to empower you on your journey. Until next time, may your days be filled with the courage and strength of a true heroine. Stay inspired.